to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is a seasoned entrepreneur and commercial real estate expert who spent decades navigating business growth, leadership, and community impact. And of course, an author too, and the author of the Book of Me, and other than Mr. Kevin Hypes. Welcome,
Hello.
welcome, Mister. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Yes, my name is Kevin Hypes. I'm happy to be here. And I'm a storyteller by trade, actually. My friends have always told me that I tell a lot of stories, and they're pretty good and funny stories. So I finally decided to write a book. So it's got about 70 what I call episodes of my life, relatively short chapters from 5 years old to 70 years old. That's right, I'm 70 years old. I know I don't look it. I look about 50 or so, which is a good thing. And it was a lot of fun putting it together. I actually wrote the book on as a YouTube channel, and I'm like I said, I'm not too good on technology, but I had a girl that set it up for me, and I told my stories into the camera, downloaded it into a manuscript, and then bingo, I had a 500-page book. So I've got a lot of interesting stories. I've done a lot of interesting things. That's why I call myself the New York Forrest Gump, because Forrest Gump, he owned a shrimp boat, but I owned an oil tanker, and all my stories are true. So it's a great book. I hope you guys want to read it, and you can ask me any questions you want. I'm like I said, I'm pretty good at answering questions.
Yes, definitely. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Mr. Kevin. Hoping for more and more Book of Me to come. What was the pivotal event or realization that made you decide my story needs to be written down now?
Well, like I said, a lot of folks told me I should write a book because I have funny stories. But one day I said, let me keep track of the stories, and I took out a piece of loose leaf paper and I started writing one-liners. And it only takes one line to remember a personal story. And after about 6 months, I had 100 one-liners, and I said, "Holy cow, I have a lot of content here." And that's when I decided to open the YouTube channel and tell the stories. So, and then from there, I didn't realize it was going to be a 500-page book. I include a lot of photographs. For some reason, when I was young, and even through my teen years, an adult, I took a lot of pictures. So every chapter's got a few pictures from 5 years old to 70. And I've done some, I mean, I can give you a couple of examples. I'm a 70s guy. I saw Jimi Hendrix play live in a place called Randall's Island under the Triborough Bridge. I went to the Watkins Glen concert. It's called the something jam, 600,000 people. I went to that jam. I even jammed with Brian Setzer, who's a famous guitar player from the Stray Cats, and I took a leak next to Ozzy Osbourne at the Fillmore East on a brick wall in 1970. That's just a few of the stories. I was in a rock band. I was a hippie. I had long hair. My poor parents worked in a bank, became a politician, and I actually now preach at a retirement center. And I got to tell you, it's the most encouraging hour of my week. So I'm a crazy guy. I got a lot of energy, and I've done a lot of things. And the book tells all the stories.
Book of Me is a bold personal title. What does it say about your approach to this memoir? Was it an act of self discovery, a legacy for your family, or a message to the world?
I think it's a combination of all of them. The actual name Book of Me, it was actually going to be named Kevin Hypes is the New York Forrest Gump. And then I rekindled my relationship with the guys in my rock and roll band when I was interviewing them for the book. And the lead singer songwriter, I hadn't talked to him in 40 years. This was back in 1979 that we were together. And we actually recorded 20 original songs professionally. And right now they're on Spotify. They're great songs. So I asked him, I said, "Roy, what have you been doing?" And he said, "Not much. I'm 74 now." And I said, "Well, Get out of that rocking chair and write me a song for my book. And you know what? He wrote a song. He called it Book of Me. It took him 2 days. It's a fantastic song. I liked it so much. It was all about me and my book. And I actually named the Book of Me after that. But I've had a lot of crazy and interesting and very challenging ups and downs in my life. Part of my mantra is life is about the journey. You see, it's about trying new things, failing, and keep trying until you succeed. I became fearless by looking at a scripture. It was in James 4, chapter 4, verse 6. It said, God opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. And I said to myself, holy cow, this is after I became a Christian halfway through my life. And I said, I didn't realize this, but if you're humble, you can't be humiliated. And most people stop themselves from doing things because they're afraid to fail. They don't want to be embarrassed and they don't want to be humiliated. And once I realized that, I said, I'm going to try everything I can and everything I'm afraid of, conquer my fears, do the best I can. Doesn't matter if I succeed or not. I'm going to try everything and enjoy life. I've been doing that now for probably 30 years. And I got to tell you, I've done a lot of things and it's been a blast. And life is about the journey. You know, it's not about making a ton of money. Once you get to the top of that mountain and make a ton of money, is all you do is when you're an old man is worry about losing it. Not me. I'm going to be climbing until God takes me home. So I think it's a book that encourages people. It's positive. I think it's interesting and different. It's very unique. All of the stories are pretty funny and they're relatively short. Each chapter or each episode is actually a separate little story. Now they connect a little bit, but you can read one chapter at a time and you're talking 70 chapters. So this is a pretty interesting thing. And at the end of the day, like for example, no, you guys, I haven't told you this, but I'm actually bipolar. Maybe that's why I have so much energy. But for the first 50 years of my life, I didn't know that. And when you're in the 70s and you're a young guy, when you get depressed, you don't go to a doctor. That's for wimps. You just tough it out. I toughed it out for 50 years until one day I collapsed. Went to a doctor. I was actually an elected official when I collapsed. I was introducing a senator at an event in the city I was a commissioner at. And I was so stressed about it that I went home and actually had a mental collapse. Went to a doctor and found out that I was bipolar. Then I realized, so that's why I've got so much energy all the time. But when those depressions come on, they're dangerous. They make you want to kill yourself. I had voices telling me I should take my own life and let my wife marry a better man and raise my kids. It's a horrible thing. But you know what? I got the right medication. I came out of it. I got back on track. I consider myself a success story. So I like talking to people. I counsel people now because I've been there. I'm very effective at that. So there's really so many different things that I think are good that come out of this book. So I want everybody to read it and get this. I'm even working on a TV series. I had a group out in LA read my book as I just wanted a separate opinion. And the young lady that got on the phone with me said, you know what? This book's really good. You got a lot of great stories. She goes, but I don't think I can make it a movie because you've done too many things, but it would make a great TV series. I'm now signed to a contract with this group and we're hiring a screenwriter. Of course, the pilot episode is going to be the oil tanker story, which is one of the best. And we're putting together a TV series. We're going to try to sell it to Netflix. So I don't know. Now, if it goes nowhere, my kids will have a little TV series for themselves and a book. Nothing wrong with that. If it goes somewhere, who knows? So as you can see, I talk a lot and I got a lot of energy, but I'm having a lot of fun. And I think anybody who reads this will enjoy it.
Indeed. And if you had to distill the entire narrative of your life into one central theme or message, what would it be?
There's there's a little bit of something in my preface in the book. This is the book, by the way, Book of Me. There you go. This is the hardcover. I want to read you a little bit of what I put in the preface. A lot of people skip the preface of a book, but mine was kind of special. And here's what I wrote near the very end of my preface. Okay, I said, so in closing, let me give you some insight and understanding of how this book came about. You see, I believe life's about the journey. I used to be kind of shy. I didn't like trying new things. To be honest, I was afraid to fail. I didn't want to embarrass myself or be humiliated. However, as you will see, when I was about 30 years old, I found Christ and started to read the scriptures. One day I read a passage, and this is the story I just told you. So let me skip down a little bit. So I said, now I'm not saying that I've mastered humility, but from that day forward, whatever I was afraid of, I did, and I did it first. If I failed, I tried again. Whatever I was afraid of, I did it first till I conquered all my fears. This new scripturally inspired approach to life led me to a lot of interesting challenges, experiences of which turned into great stories and exciting successes, and a ton of remarkable tales to share. Yes, I am climbing the mountain of life, and it's about working hard to get to the top. But I discovered that to fully have a rewarding life is actually better if you never get there. You keep climbing. Yes, life's about the journey. I'll say one more thing because I think that wasn't the one I wanted to read. But here's another piece. I want you to know something right up front before you read this book. As special as I think I am, the truth is that I'm no more special than you are. That's the moral of the story. God made us all unique and different, yet with a lot in common. I think that I think that's actually the definition of special. Here's another moral to the story. It took me a long time to realize that I was special. Yeah, most of my life I thought I was just different, kind of not as good, and in many ways disappointing to those around me. Well, let me save you some time and anxiety. I've learned over the years that by understanding that God loves me unconditionally and made me exactly who I am, and by simply applying a little self-depreciating humor, all of a sudden I became very special. And get this, so are you. That's the part I really wanted to read. So that's kind of the nutshell version. A little long, but I think it says it all.
Very well done, Mr. Kevin. Very well done. So, every life has a crucible, a period of intense suffering or testing that forges us one's character. Can you tell us about your own and how it's fundamentally reshaped you?
Yes, I've had a few points in life that were very difficult. The first one was when I was young, and this is an episode in the book. I was camping with a bunch of my friends, and this is when I was young and a big drinker. I was probably 15, 16 years old. On a camping trip, we had very little supervision, and all of us guys snuck in a whole bunch of beer and wine, and we ended up going down to a stream that was on a cliff, rolling out blankets, playing guitars, and drinking Almadine wine. I can remember this. And we got drunk and we fell asleep. And in the middle of the night, I got up and my best friend who was sitting next to me was missing. I didn't know where he was. Well, come to find out the next morning, he actually fell off the cliff. He must have got up in the middle of the night thinking he was in his room, maybe went to the bathroom and stumbled right off the cliff. Well, when you're 15 years old and your best friend falls off a cliff and dies, I got to tell you, I never knew anybody that died before. I thought he was going to talk to me in my sleep, and I felt very guilty about it. We all did. There was 30 of us on that trip. It was a very, very difficult time. 1,200 high school kids showed up at his funeral. Tragic, and I knew his parents. His dad was the coach of the football team, and he was never the same after that. That tragic event changed me forever. And I got to tell you, that was very difficult to get over. For 10 years, I carried a picture of him in my wallet. Actually, it might have been 20 years. So it was very hard to get past that. It really wasn't until I became a Christian that I realized that he was a believer and God took him home to heaven. And that was a little bit more rewarding. But that was a very difficult time at 16, 15 years old. That might have triggered my depressions because they started around the same time. And for 30 years after that, I was depressed. Every 2 or 3 years, a black cloud would come over my head and the voices would start telling me, you're no good. You're a loser. You might as well just take yourself off this planet. And I used to have to tough it out. Sometimes it's for 2 to 3 months until that cloud passed. And I never really got any help for it until I was 50 years old and I collapsed. When I was on the right medication, I was fixed. It was like a victory for me. So I've had some pretty good ups and downs. And being an entrepreneur and a guy that's made a lot of deals and made a lot of money and lost a lot of money, at 60 years old, This is 10 or 12 years ago, right after the 2007 crash in real estate. I had so many projects going on. And when that hit, I lost everything. I was broke at 60 years old. I had to sell everything I had, negotiate my way out of over $1.6 million in debt, which I did pretty effectively, actually. And I had to start all over. My wife and I had to rent a house. That was about 10, 11 years ago. Now I'm back. I've got developments going. I'm a zillionaire, but I'm a pretty well established guy with some money in the bank. So never give up and learn from your mistakes and just keep plugging away. You got to have a positive attitude. And you know what? Be a guy that likes to make friends with people. I'm a very friendly guy, as you can tell. People in business like doing business with people they like. If you're a hardworking, honest guy, you'll be very successful. I've been very blessed. I went into real estate. I had no college. I was a street kid from Queens, and I was a hippie, and I worked in a factory until one day I got a job in a real estate office from one of my brother's friends. And I realized that, you know what? Real estate's not that complicated. Good with people, good with numbers. And that's me. I've always been good with numbers, good with people. And I was working around a bunch of Harvard grads, and I was intimidated by these guys because they all went to college and I didn't. And after a few months, I realized, you know what? These guys aren't any smarter than me. As a matter of fact, I think I was smarter than a lot of them. I gained confidence and I succeeded. So it's been an interesting life. Every story in that book is an interesting, funny story. And there's 60 of them. There's one about my dentist. His name is Dr. Sotlin. And when I was 6 years old, my mom was broke. And when they drilled, it was $5 a cavity to drill. And the doctor said to my mom, "It's $5 a cavity, Mrs. Hypes." And she said, well, we can't afford much. Okay. And he goes, "Do you want the Novocaine?" And she said, "How much is that?" And he said, "It's another $5. And she said, "We can't afford the Novocaine." And me and my brother looked at each other like, holy cow, what does that mean? We very quickly renamed him Dr. Sotlin the Butcher. I got my teeth drilled out with no Novocaine. And back then, those drills, they looked like rubber bands and wires. They were terrible. Like, I got pulled teeth out of my mouth with a pair of pliers. I got to tell you, it was torture. But you know what? Back in those days, your parents made all the decisions. It didn't matter what you wanted, not like today. And you know what? It kind of toughened us up for the real world. It wasn't all that bad, actually. I got a lot of stories like that with a lot of interesting little things at the end that let you know that growing up was pretty interesting back in the 60s and 70s.
Something different from now. So, Mr. Kevin, as an entrepreneur as well as an author, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
Short-term goal is really to focus on the book and focus on the screenplay and actually to speak publicly. As you can tell, I like talking and I preach. So I'm kind of an animated, passionate speaker. I want to help people. I want to tell people my stories and tell them how it helped me, how I got past things in life. I got to tell you, the depression thing is a very serious thing. You know, you can get depressed and if you're fortunate, you can get on the right medication and you can get fixed. But you know what? The most difficult part about depression is getting back into the workforce, getting back on the horse. When you're down and you're either in a facility or you're home recovering for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and you go back to work, everybody's like, "Where have you been? You've been gone for 6 months." That's a very uncomfortable question to answer. And a lot of people can't handle that and they can't get back into the workforce. I help people recover. I help get them back in and give them confidence and tell them, don't worry about it. Just get going. So short term, to help other people, get the book out, maybe work on the screenplay. Long term, I don't know that I'll ever retire. I'm kind of a deal junkie. I'll always do real estate, but I'll probably just do less deals as time goes on. I own my own business. But long term, you know, I think I might want to preach. I might want to go overseas and, tell the lost about Jesus, be kind of like a Billy Graham kind of guy. I can't decide if I want to be Billy Graham or the president. I just keep going back and forth. I can't decide. So, but I certainly want to, I want to help people, and long term, I want to serve God until He takes me home, take care of my wife, do some traveling, stuff like that. Who knows? Maybe write another book. I'm beginning to build up a few more stories, so it might be time to write another book pretty soon.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Kevin, and good luck for that. And thank you for that advice. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
I'm sorry. Recommend what?
Recommend a book or books that influence your journey.
Oh, okay. So, well, the Bible. I recommend reading the Bible. I've learned a lot from the scriptures, and I try to read a few every day. Um, Actually, I was also, I really wasn't much of a reader, but there was a time where I read a lot of books about World War II. I just got into that. I'm a very strategic thinker kind of guy, like a chess player, and I read books about leaders. That's what I did. Not necessarily about the war, but it was about that timeline. I read books about uh, MacArthur, Patton, Eisenhower. Churchill was my favorite, and just all sorts of others, President Kennedy, and all sorts of different leaders, because I learned a lot about leadership, seeing how leaders handled themselves, how they solved problems, how they carried themselves. Read books about leadership. That's what I would do. Read books about Churchill. That guy was great. And MacArthur was interesting too. All of them, actually. Roosevelt, Eisenhower. I read a lot of books about leaders, but I never really read many self-help type books or school books. I wasn't a school book kind of guy. I was a kind of figure it out on your own. That wasn't always smart, but for some reason I was always able to figure it out. It may not have been the best way to do it, but I did it. So that's my advice on books and reading the Bible and read about leaders.
Thank you for that recommended book, Mr. Kevin. And for someone wondering why they should read the story of Kevin Hypes, what will you tell them?
I believe my life story is encouraging and positive, but it's not a self-help book. It's an interesting life story about a guy that did a lot of things. Some of them weren't so smart, some of them I'm not proud of, but it's a true life story. I'm a very genuine guy. And it's a memoir, and from 5 years old, the stories are funny and interesting, and they're relatively short and easy reading. People tell me it's like having a conversation with me. So I think if you're just looking for an interesting, positive, yet unique reading of a guy who lived through listen, Forrest Gump was what, 60s, 70s, 80s. I was 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000, 210, and I'm still rolling in the 220s. So you're talking about 7 decades of interesting stories through all of the things that this world has gone through, from the black and white era of the 50s all the way to today. I got to tell you, that's a pretty interesting trip to take. I think you'll like it. And when this TV series comes out, you're gonna like that too. So it's a worthwhile read, I think.
Definitely. And before we wrap up our discussion, Mr. Kevin, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season. Abstract poetry in second season. I'm a book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season. I'm a food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101 in fourth season. And my baby podcast, Law 101 and Mental Health 101. Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 Review, Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in
Wow.
its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Kevin, looking back, what single choice, personal or professional, are you most grateful you made?
It was May 4th, 1984, when my older brother, who's a preacher, shared the scriptures with me, shared the gospel with me. And it wasn't until that day, I kind of thought I was always a good guy and I kind of knew I believed in God. But until you get to know Jesus personally, and it's just like the books I read books about John F. Kennedy and I knew who he was, but I didn't know who he was as the man until I read the books about him. You read the Bible like a good book and get to know Jesus and see what he did for you, dying for your sins. That impacted my heart and it caused me to change my entire life cycle. It's the best thing that ever happened to me. That was the key moment in my life, May 4th, 1984. I'll never forget it. And it changed me forever. And I think for the better.
Yes, for the better indeed. And Mr. Kevin Hype, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Hoping for more and more empowering books like this to come and more empowering business.
Go to Amazon right now. Book of me,
Yes.
Kevin Hypes.
Yes, again. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your book?
Yes, please buy it on Amazon, $6.99. Piece of cake.
Piece of cake. For sure. So, Mr. Kevin, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, sir. And thanks for having me on.
More to come, people. See you soon.